Success of a meditation practice depends on consistency, depends on two things. Consistency, in other words, you do it every single day. Why? Because in order to get where you are now as a personality, you are practicing being that every single day, 24/7, right? So it's unrealistic to think that you could listen to these teachings and understand that you're not actually a personality and then just stop being that. That's not the way it works. Because the personality is playing in your mind as a series of different patterns of thoughts and emotions. That's what your personality is. It doesn't exist any other way. If I ask you who you are, you'll tell me what you think, because your life as a personality exists in the thought process. You know, you're thinking as the person that you consider yourself to be, right? And so in the practice of meditation, what the other thing other than consistency that's necessary to get the result is the teaching, okay? To just sit and relax the physical body and calm the mind is valuable. That'll make a difference. Without any teaching, that'll make a difference. And you may even probably would, if you did the practice consistently the way it's meant to be done over time, you probably would at some point make contact with your true nature. You know, just because it's there all the time, and if you're practicing consistently, sooner or later you're gonna recognize it. But the teaching supports that. The teaching is a conceptual understanding of the truth. Okay, and the basic teaching that is part of all traditional spiritual practices is to come to an understanding about who you are and what is real. Those are the two things that are being dealt with in all the teachings from all the practices when you get to the fundamental mystical level of it, even Christianity, even Judaism. At the fundamental level of it, and what I mean by that, at the level of it that Jesus was teaching, right? He was teaching the exact same thing as the Buddha, right? He was teaching about who you are and about what's real and what's true, right? That got turned into an institution, it got turned into a belief system, and that's a shame because it's not necessary to believe something that you can experience. And the experience is what makes the difference, not what you believe. The evidence of that is obvious if you look at humanity. Most of humanity has different beliefs about who they are and what's real, but those beliefs don't make much of a difference in terms of whether they're content, happy, satisfied, and peaceful. So the only thing that will make a difference in terms of whether you're content, happy, satisfied, and peaceful is if you experience your true nature, because your true nature is happy, satisfied, content, and peaceful. So you don't have to do anything to experience that. All you have to do is stop thinking that you're something other than what you really are. And if you start to experience what you really are, that's what's there. That's the experience that's there. So it's necessary, if you're interested in experiencing the truth in terms of who you are and what's real, it's necessary to establish a meditation practice and to study the teachings. And when I say study the teachings, I'm not talking about necessarily Buddhism, although Buddhism is a very powerful and strong version of the teachings, especially Zen, because Zen focuses on meditation. But you can study the teachings of Jesus Christ. You can study the teachings of Muhammad. You can study the teachings of Lao Tse from Taoism. You can study the teachings in Sufism. If you get to the basic fundamental teachings of any of these practices or religions, you'll find that they're talking about the same thing. They're talking about what's missing for most of humanity. You know, we're born into this situation that we're experiencing, and when we're born into this situation that we're experiencing as little children, we're taught that you're a personality, right? We're taught that you're a personality. You're given feedback about yourself as to what you are from your family and your parents. And they're basically telling you, you're that body, you're that person, here's your name, here's what you're like, here's what you like, here's what you don't like, here's what you're good at, here's what you're not good at. So you go right into the personality as soon as you get language, right? And then you start getting prepared to be successful as a personality, right? By going to kindergarten, learn how to get along with other people, learn how to respect authority, and then learn how to get a vocation so you can make money and be happy. That formula hasn't been very successful if you look at the news, or if you look at your own experience, if you look at your own family, right? Or if you look at the incidence of suicide, or if you look at the incidence of depression or anxiety, especially now, because we're living in such a dark time, right? Yeah, so the thing that this doesn't happen is when you are born, that the first thing that you could be given that would work is to be given the teaching about your true nature, which is that you are awareness that has taken on manifestation as a physical body. The Dalai Lama had that education, you know, from birth. The first thing he was taught was what you are, right? What you are and what's real. You know, he had the benefit of learning that before learning anything, right? Which makes sense, right? If you're going to be in this world, you might as well know what's in this world as you, right? And if you're going to be in this world, you might as well get clear about what this world is in terms of what is reality, what is true, what is so. And then when you have that basis, then you have a foundation that works. You have a foundation that's true and real that you can live your life from. And then if you take on a vocation, the vocation won't be to teach you something to practice that will make you successful as a person. The vocation will be something that you can do as an activity that will be a contribution that you can make in life to other people. And that'll be a vocation that is fulfilling to experience instead of just making money. So one way to talk about this is you could say there are two wings on this bird, right? One is the practice of meditation, and the other is the teaching. And the two of them come together. The teaching is a conceptual understanding of what's true and real. The practice is an experience of that conceptual understanding. Right? I wish I had known that earlier in my life, you know, because when I was a young man, I learned about the teachings, you know, through Alan Watts and through a lot of other people who were writing about these things back in the day. But I didn't understand that the practice is critical in order for those teachings to be realized. And since I took LSD, I figured, you know, if I took LSD and I understood the teachings, I could use LSD, you know, to experience the teachings. But that wasn't what happened. I just got high. If you just understand the concepts, you'll end up being upset a lot because the understanding of the concepts doesn't work in terms of making a difference in your life. I found that out the hard way. I understood the concepts very well, right? But I didn't have an experience of what the concepts were, right? So I was still crazy. I still did stupid stuff over and over again, no matter what I understood, right? And that was a very frustrating experience in terms of, you know, at some point you ask yourself, what the hell's wrong with me? You know, I understand a lot about truth. I understand a lot about, you know, what I am, right? But these understandings don't seem to make much of a difference. When the shit hits the fan, I still go nuts. Right? But then I had the good fortune of coming in contact with some good teachers and coming and learning some meditation practices. And then it became evident to me that the practice makes the difference. You know, because if you're doing the practice, right, you have an experience of what the concepts are. It's one thing for me to tell you that you're not your body or you're not your personality and your true nature is awareness itself, and that awareness is always happy, satisfied, peaceful, right, content. That awareness is like that, and that awareness is always there. It's never not there. It has to always be there because it's you, and if you're here, it's here, like that. But if you've been conditioned to believe that you're a body and a personality, and that's what you're paying attention to all day, you're not home. You're not home for the experience of what you are, right? So it's through the practice that the understandings of the concepts support you in the practice in terms of as you experience what you will experience in the practice, you have a way of understanding it conceptually, and then there's a marriage between the concept and the experience. And this does work. This is the fulfillment of the possibility that exists for you as a human being. And so if you're studying the teachings and you're doing the practice, right, and you have support of a community or you have the support of a teacher that's awake and knows what they're doing, right, then that process will guide you on a path. And as you're on that path doing the practice, and deepening your understanding of everything, right? The personality at some point will be recognized clearly enough for you to turn your attention away from it because you recognize that it's not alive. It can't experience well-being because it's not alive. It's only existing in thinking. And so when you come to the understanding of that, and you've been practicing and you have an experience of what you actually are, right? Then when the personality plays, it's under suspicion, right? Because its programming and its purpose and its intention is different from the natural state. Its program and its intention is to survive as a physical body and a personality. And if you're clear about that and you're awake enough to watch the operation of the personality, you can see that that's true. It's getting through the day, that's survival, right? It's coping, that's survival, right? It's putting up with, that's survival. It's struggling against life, that's survival, an attempt to survive, right? It's rejecting life, right? But that's an attempt to survive as a personality that sees itself as separate from the world, right? Yeah, that's the beginning of the process of suffering. If you consider yourself to be a physical body and a personality that's separate from all other bodies and personalities and separate from reality itself, right? Then of course you're going to be surviving. The odds are way against you. You got 8 billion people to deal with, right? You have a world that's unpredictable and changing all the time. And so as a personality, you try and understand or believe in yourself as something that is constant, something that is real and something that is constant, right? At least your name is constant, right? But everything else is changing all the time. That's what makes you neurotic, because you think of yourself as something that stays the same every day, and yet the only thing that stays the same is your name. Everything else is changing all the time. Your thoughts are changing, your emotions are changing, the world's changing, your family's changing. Everything's changing all the time. So it's unstable, and it's unsettling to the personality because the personality is seeking some fundamental peace, some fundamental consistency, something that stays the same, that can be counted on, right? So you can experience some safety, some happiness, some fulfillment in this life, right? And the interesting thing is, as you understand the teachings and do the practices, you come to the realization that the awareness that you are is the answer to that problem, because the awareness never changes. The awareness is exactly the same now as it was when you were 5 years old, right? It's the same as it was yesterday. It'll be the same tomorrow. So it's totally consistent, totally constant. And if you experience yourself as that consistently, in relationship to everything else that is changing, right? Then you have what they call in Buddhism a refuge, right? You have a refuge. You have a place of safety, you have a place of rest, you have a place of peace, you have a place of fulfillment, a place of satisfaction and contentment, because the awareness that is our true nature is always content. Why? Because it doesn't need anything. It's always satisfied because it's not seeking anything, right? It's not going anywhere. It doesn't want anything. It's not a physical body. It's not a man or a woman. It doesn't exist in the past or the future. It only exists in the present moment. And the present moment is reality. So that's a good place to live, right? In the present moment. So your true identity, the awareness itself, the natural you, the you that's there naturally all the time, right, has the fulfillment that you seek as a person. It's already fulfilled. The personality can never be fulfilled. The personality can never be happy. The personality can never be satisfied and can never be at peace. This is very, very important for you to understand, because that understanding will motivate you to do the practice. If you're serious about wanting to experience being happy, satisfied, and peaceful, then these practices and these teachings should be very attractive to you. But it's not a free lunch. You're going to have to practice your way out of being limited and stuck in a personality and stuck being the way a personality is, which is dysfunctional, neurotic, and unworkable. You have to see that in spades. You have to really get clear about that. If you really get clear about that, you simply won't be willing to continue to live your life that way. Right? And the practice of meditation is what will actually transform the experience from being a personality to experience yourself as awareness. Because it's one thing to understand it conceptually, but it's another thing to actually be aware of being aware. It's a little tricky because, the personality believes in form. The personality believes, I'll believe it if I can see it, right? Seeing is believing, right? And so if you say to the personality, well, what you really are is not the physical body or the personality, what you really are is awareness itself. And then the personality will say, okay, let me see it. But you can't see it. As St. Francis of Assisi said, what you're looking for is what's looking. Right? So you can never see what you are because you're looking from there, right? But you can experience what you are because you're being that. It's an experience. It's better than seeing it. You're actually experiencing being that, and that experience of being that makes it clear and evident to you that that is in fact your true nature. Yeah. And then from that experience, you can begin to have a view of the world and a view of life that's realistic. What do I mean by realistic? A view of life and a view of the world that's realistic means that you understand, for example, that the only real time is now. The only reality is the present moment, and your entire life is happening in this present moment, no other place. And so if you can train yourself and practice to pay attention to the present moment, right, you're in the real world. That gets you into the real world, right? And then if you understand, when you're in the real world, the mind is interpreting what's going on that's coming from the senses, right? It's interpreting that and using language to interpret that and tell you what's going on all the time. Right? The only problem with that is that process in which the thinking is occurring to do that is based on fear. It's a fear-based operation because it's a survival-based operation, right? So you're perceiving everything in terms of, will it threaten me? You're perceiving everything in terms of whether it's dangerous, whether it's good or bad, do I like it or not like it? Your life is being sorted out that way all the time, right? But when you come to an experience of your true nature, you realize that this operation that's going on and thinking in the mind is distorting everything. It's making everything seem like it's dangerous and fearful. When in the experience of the awareness and you look from that view, you don't see it that way. You see everything is wonderful, everything is miraculous, everything is exciting, everything's an adventure. And you can afford to do that because the awareness can't be threatened. The awareness can't be threatened. Why? It has no form. What are you going to do to it? It has no form. It has wisdom. It's not limited by the experiences and what you've learned in your life. It's unlimited because when you're experiencing the awareness, you're understanding that what you thought was a self, what you thought had a name and was a self, is just a concept. It's not real. It doesn't actually exist. Right? And because that's the case and you're making contact with what does exist and what is real, right? Then you have an experience that's fundamentally different from the experience of being a personality. You have an experience of, if it's true that there is no self in this body, if that's just a concept that I believed in, that's not actually true. If it's true that there's no self in this body, in fact, if it's true that there is no self, all there is an experience of reality that's happening all the time, but it's not a self. If it's not a self, then nothing can happen to it. Not only can nothing happen to it, but if it's not a self, then it's no longer separate from the rest of reality. It's not a separate self. If it's not a separate self and it's not a self, what is it? It's everything. It's everything. So the experience that becomes available through the concepts and through the practice is that you are the universe. The universe is happening as you. The universe is experiencing itself as you. And it's not a self. There is no two. It's not dualistic. If you think you're a separate self, that's a dualistic reality. I'm separate from everything else. When you wake up, you realize that's an illusion. That's a dream. That's not true. You're not separate from everything else. And if you're not separate from everything else, then you and the universe are the same thing. You and the universe are the same thing. The experience of that is ecstasy. The experience of that is fulfillment, right? Because there's nothing to survive from, there's nothing to escape from, there's nothing to resist, there's nothing to reject. That's called flow. That's called being in the zone, You just are practicing letting go. Just practicing letting go, and letting go of the thinking, letting go of the emotional reactions, letting go of the past, and allow yourself to just be present in such a way that you're flowing with the whole universe, right? This is what's possible. And when you get to that experience, your life is fulfilled. And when you get to that experience, death is no longer a frightening prospect. Because in these teachings and in the experience of the truth, there is no death. That's what Jesus Christ was trying to get across to people when he said, I offer you life everlasting. How could you have life everlasting unless there's no death? That's exactly what he was trying to get across to people. Most of the people, unfortunately, didn't get it, right? But it is the truth. And if you experience your true nature, you experience a state of deathlessness. Deathlessness, because if the only reality that is real is what's happening in the present moment, and in that moment you're not separate from anything, you are what's happening along with everything else. You're no different than the whole universe. If that's the case, how can anything die? Because if that's the case, what you thought you were wasn't born. If that's the case, if you are the universe, you've been here as long as the universe. And you'll be here as long as the universe. And if this universe comes to an end, there'll be another Big Bang, and you'll be here for another series of the universe. And that's the way it goes. So when you experience that, you can just relax and enjoy the ride, and realize there's nothing to be concerned about. Everything is being taken care of. Everything is being taken care of. And you and God are partners. Or better yet, you and God are actually the same thing, right? Because God in these teachings is not some guy up in the sky. No, God in these teachings is the entire energetic form of the universe happening the way it's happening. And you are it, and it is you. So if God is the creative aspect of the universe, then you and God are the same thing. Right? Because the source is generating what's being manifest. The source is generating the form of the universe, right? And that is being generated in your experience all the time. Yeah, because when you're in the experience of what you actually are, the circumstances aren't the source of your experience. Who's at the table is not the source of your experience. The crazy uncle is not the one that's bothering you anymore, right? When you start to be awake, you can be with your family, you can be with other people, right? And the situation is not where your experience is coming from. Your experience is coming from your true nature, and your true nature is satisfied and content. So you're just enjoying that. You're enjoying that and then being with people. You're enjoying that, and then when you look at the people, you know who they are just like you're experiencing who you are. They may not know it, right? They may not know it, so you forgive them. You forgive them for they know not who they are. You forgive them because they're doing their best as a personality to make it through life, right? But you can love them for who they are and not for who they think they are. And that's the experience you can have of yourself and of every other human being. That's why when the Dalai Lama goes into an auditorium of people, he doesn't just go sit down, because he's experiencing being with his family. Right? So he'll go over to the people and start talking to the people and bowing to the people and making eye contact with the people. And people cry in his presence, right? Because they experience the clarity, and they experience the unconditional love that is the nature of this man, right? And that brings them to tears. It moves people to experience their true nature in the presence of another person who's experiencing their true nature, like that. You have right now, human beings have the best opportunity ever in the history of humanity to study the teachings and practice this. Because you have the time to do it, right? And the teachings are on the internet. Everything is on the internet. You can study anything on the internet. And you can watch videos. That's why I videotape these talks, right? Because I have a YouTube channel for this class, and there's almost 600 talks there to listen to. So you can get a college education on spirituality just by listening to those talks, right? So it's not like you don't have the resources. You have the resources, and you have the time, and you have the opportunity, and you're in a good position to do that because you're not in chronic or acute pain, or even if you are in chronic or in acute pain, these things are still possible and they still work. And you're not in Gaza, right? And you're not in Trump Tower, So you don't have to deal with all that insanity, right? So do yourself a favor and take advantage of the opportunity that your life is.
Should our practice be at the same time every day, or can it be different?
Yes and no. To do it the same time every day is good in terms of if you do it first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Those are two valuable times, right? And you can reboot your computer called the mind first thing in the morning, right? Or you can reboot your computer in the evening before you go to bed at night, right? So those are two things that are good times to do it consistently, right? But the more important thing than that is to make sure you do it every 24 hours without fail. So that if you don't do it, like this morning, my day was running a little late from home, right? So I didn't do my practice yet from home. I usually do it first thing in the morning, right? So now when I get done here and I do my workout, I go home, then I do my practice. But you see, you have to come to an understanding where you're clear that doing this practice is like getting a blood transfusion every day. And if you do it consistently over time, it will be obvious to you the difference that it's making. Why? Because in the course of your daily life, when you're being challenged by all the craziness in the world, right, you'll start to notice your ability to be present to that, and that's not affecting your ability to be happy, satisfied, and peaceful. When you have that experience, you know goddamn well what meditation is. All right?